The whole world is waiting. The whole world cries.
Oh,
These nightmares about Pam. Somebody trying to tell me something.
yeah. So, you know what? I don't see our speaker. Um, and I hope everything is well with her. Uh, we had kind of an extensive exchange. I'll tell you what she was, and I'm going to tell you what she was going to speak on. And then I'm going to ask Barb if she could tell us about Israelism, which is going to um, uh, she her organization is going to be showing tomorrow night um, Israelism. But let me just say this, that Lynn told me, she said, I can speak from the perspective of Jewish revolutionary nonviolence, what it means to organize for shared liberation. In fact, that was going to be her title was going to be Ceasefire, Replanting Seeds of Shared Liberation. Um, and she wanted to talk about actively resisting systems of racism, apartheid, militarism, and genocide, and speak to the way Zionism has consecrated the use of violence against others, and in particular Palestinians, not only, but in particular, and the ways that Zionism has corrupted traditional forms of Judaism. Um, and we don't see her, regrettably. But Barb, tell us about Israelism.
Hi, you all. Thank you. And it's great to be here with you all. And I'm an organizer with Jewish Voice for Peace. And we are showing the film Israelism this week. It is exactly about the way people like myself were brought up with Zionism in the synagogue and made to believe that Israel and Judaism were the same. And and so the film is about some young people coming to see how much that was, how they were brought up. And as they begin to see how that is not true, that Judaism is not the same as Israel. And it was here long, long before the state of Israel. So I hope you can come and enjoy it with us. And if not, you can probably see it in a different way online. So thank you very much.
Barb, before you mute again, this is going to be at uh, our location where we meet when we meet in person on State Street and Padre, and at 7 p.m. tomorrow, right? For those
That,
who live with
that's right.
close enough. Yeah.
That's right. We're grateful to have that space as well. So we hope to see some of you.
Well, Barb, would you just go ahead and just say a little bit more about your story? I know that I interviewed you on our podcast, but there are folks here who may not know, how you started out as a child and then things changed for you. Can you kind of bring us up to date on that?
Sure, I'm no competition for the rabbi here. Um, no, I've been brought up in a Zionist household when I was young, and was very troubled by things that I saw going on in Israel. And I went to Israel on pilgrimage when I was 16. It was, and then on in college, just started to see the military approach of Israel, and it always bothered me. And it took me a while to find people who were also troubled by it, because my family, there was no one in the Jewish community who I could speak to. Whenever I did, I was shut down or told, no, you're wrong. So I was basically gaslighted my whole young life about my questions about Israel. And it wasn't until, well, there was an organization called Peace Now that started to map the mapping of Israel, the West Bank and Gaza, and how the land became stolen, how the Israelis stole the land from the Palestinians, kept taking their land away, kept taking their water away, taking their rights to move away. And more and more and more, it became unbearable for me. But the good part was I started finding people like myself who also not only felt it, but had evidence about it. I worked with Jeff Halper, who was very much involved with houses that were being demolished. And he went around the United States with Palestinians whose homes had been demolished. And even with that, there was so much denial, and as there has continued to be. So our role in Jewish Voice for Peace has been to show people, we used to have to show people what the way Israel was controlling the lives of Palestinians in very unjust and inhuman ways. But it's also true that now we don't have to show anyone, because Israel has shown itself to be a place of not only apartheid, but a genocidal intent to get rid of the Palestinian people. And as part of this coalition that I've been honored to be a part of, and with people like yourselves who are sympathetic and allies, we are joining forces for liberation for the Palestinians and expanding our understanding of how that liberation isn't just for us. It isn't just for me as an anti-Zionist. It isn't just for the Palestinians. It's for all of us in this struggle against colonial rule that destroys the integrity of our communities, and the military complicity of the United States. And we can see clearly now how our money, our American money, is being used to send bombs to kill the Palestinians, which is, yeah. So that's where I am now. And I know some of you have been a part of that struggle and our protest. And now we are not just waiting for a ceasefire, because that's just the beginning. We have to do a lot of work to liberate ourselves from the lies we've been told, and to begin to take responsibility for our own part in this struggle. So that's a little bit.
Can you take a couple of questions from us, Barb?
Sure, I can try.
All right. Well, wow. We had scheduled Margie to help make this happen, and so maybe she can go ahead and do that.
Sorry, hi. Well, Barb, so nice to meet you. Thank you so much for sharing. One thing that strikes me, I hope that, that I feel like I can relate in a way, because so much of American Christian fundamentalism sounds very similar, where I grew up believing that, what was good for America, what was good for America was good for Christianity. And so I just didn't, I guess since I'm already like linked the video so I can watch it. It's just very interesting to me. I know that that Caroline was also scheduled to share, so, or to ask questions. So I guess I want to know, like, how did you find these other people? Like, was it in your young adult years or in your teen years? How did you deconstruct maybe your Zionistic beliefs that you grew up with?
Mm.
Yeah, well, I'm now 70 years old, and unfortunately, it took me a very long time to find other folks. I found occasional someone, but they were just visiting. But when my friend Rand Clark got back from the West Bank, and I saw him at a Fund for Santa Barbara event, I was like, he was ready to organize for the Palestinians. He was there. He saw how their nonviolent protest every week, they would be still thrown in jail for throwing a rock with administrative detention, which means they don't, they're not told how long, they're not given legal rights, they're under military rule. And so Rand and I gathered and we tried to figure out what we should do, if we should do it as Jewish people or just join other folks who are already doing it, like the Quakers and other people. And then it was Jewish Voice for Peace came alive in like 2008 or something like that. And then, and Jewish Voice for Peace was fighting for Palestinians. And the great thing about it is JVP has organized with the global Palestinian community. And that was kind of that has been a core principle of organizing, because it's not just us saying we don't like that and we wish it were better. It's asking, what is it the Palestinian global community needs and wants? And we were told they want boycott, divestment, and sanction used as a method of nonviolent resistance. And that was actually a difficult discussion where at first we were boycotting only things in the settlement or only things that were companies in the settlements. And then we began to see how integral many of these companies are in surveillance, integrated into the Israeli government of all the electronics and communications and military, and how it's all connected. And it became really clear, I'm not quite sure when, 2011 or 12, when they said, come on, you have to go with boycott, divestment, and sanction. And we did. We declared ourselves BDS. And that is when really all hell broke loose on us as Jewish people. They called us terrorists. They called us anti-Semitic. They called us whatever name they could come up with. And I say they, the Israeli government.
Self-hating Jews.
Pardon?
Self-hating Jews.
They called us self-hating Jews, of course. And I had to question that in myself. Is that true? Do I hate myself? Do I hate being Jewish? And I know for a fact that's not true. But I had to go through a lot of questioning because there is a lot of trauma, as many marginalized groups are. There's intergenerational trauma, of course, before the Holocaust and way before for many years, and the Holocaust and after. And so there's a lot of fear, a lot of terrible traumatic fear. And I can see the way it's manifested. It manifests in different ways, and I've studied that. And now I see the pieces of myself that are harmed, that are hurt. But it's like, that's not a good excuse to harm anyone else. Mm. And one has to see that in oneself. And that's the hard part. I think for all of us, when we actually take responsibility for things we've done. And so our job now in Jewish Voice for Peace is, and this is what the Palestinian community has told us, you need to talk to the Zionist. And that's very challenging because they don't want to talk to us. They don't want to hear, what hurts them very much. And it's very painful for someone to see their part in this terrible, terrible, horrifying trauma for the Palestinian people. So I don't know if I've answered your question.
No, yeah, no. So it's been a process, but even you said even as a child, you were uncomfortable with some of the things that you saw. Is that what you said?
Yeah, and I think, there's parts that are the patriarchy itself, which is a part of many fundamental religious beliefs. I always had trouble with that. And I came up during the feminist time. So being pushed around and ignored was one of my places of harm personally that was beyond being Jewish. And so but I saw that in the Israeli culture is a very military culture because they have to be in all citizens are go through the military, and that creates a certain environment and a certain way of being, and the culture itself was very problematic for me, and I don't know if I could have articulated it when I was young, very young, but I certainly had discomfort. And it wasn't until I got older and I started fighting for the things I believed in, and I was still put down very heavily. And so that was all part of my coming out as a full person in Jewish Voice for Peace. And even though I may have lost the debate, I knew I was right. And it wasn't just me alone. I had other people. And as we became organized, we had other people with us as we got to know Palestinians. I've been working with Palestinian students and faculty, and that gives me a real experience of the way other people's lives have been and how their families lost everything in 1948. And that's gives me strong grounding. It's not just like an abstract idea.
Right. Yeah. I love that you guys wanted to hear what they asked, what they needed, and what they wanted us to participate in as allies.
And of course, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I have a question about what you say when people ask you about how Israel will defend itself if there's a ceasefire. I mean, and they say, well, that'll just be the end of Israel because we haven't gotten all of Hamas.
Well, I think, and even the Israelis say this, the generals say this, everybody in Israel has pretty much acknowledged this except Netanyahu, that they can't destroy Hamas. You cannot completely destroy it. And resistance is created by domination and oppression. That's key. That's the key point. If people are oppressed, there will be resistance.
Yeah.
And so this fear they have of people destroying them could really be diminished if they didn't want to destroy the Palestinian people. And that is that's the challenge, I think, now. That's the challenge now, is to stop being so afraid, or to say, I am afraid, and just acknowledge it, and to say that fear does not make it right to destroy the Palestinian people. to take anything away from them, to make them less than me. That is, there's no justification, absolutely none. So for a Jewish person or anyone who supports Israel to say, oh, they'll be destroyed, well, maybe this idea of a dominating culture should be destroyed.
Is there, I've been reading Haaretz, Israeli newspaper, and occasionally I come across an article about a word that I can't remember in Hebrew that starts with an H, and it's about their narrative. And it's
Hasbara.
Hasbara, thank you. And I also heard that there was some kind of agency or organization that controls the narrative. I mean, that it's just out there. It's not an undercover secretive agency, but it's a group of people that control what the hostages say, if they're released, and the whole dominant narrative is tightly controlled. Journalism, I heard they were getting rid of Al Jazeera in Israel. Do you know anything about how that's working out?
Well, I think if you've been reading Haaretz, which is the daily left paper in Israel, you know they're very critical. There's a lot of critique of the government. And Hasbara it just means propaganda. And the Israeli government has been putting out millions and millions and millions of dollars for many years to combat people like myself. They're the ones who said, okay, we've got to declare Jewish Voice for Peace terrorists. We've got to call them self-hating Jews. We've got to call them anti-Semitic. So they're also the ones who have created this narrative, the government, and all the supporting Zionist organizations in the United States, and the political ones. I could name them all, but you've probably heard. They're mainstream Jewish organizations that have taken on that narrative, and they just keep repeating it. And that's Hasbara. That's this propaganda. So it's not just one person or one organization or one group. It is the whole mechanism. It's like Zionism in general. It's like, okay, we're going to say these people are bad, so then everybody believes they're bad. And it's hard to stop something like that, as we know.
Wow. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Lisa.
I have a question for you, Barb. Before October 7th, before the attack, Netanyahu was in a huge amount of trouble with corruption of his government, and it's my understanding that most of the Israeli people were going to get rid of him in the next election if they could. Like 70% of the people were against his government. Is there any way, and I don't know, this is pure speculation, but it seems to me that the October 7th, the only one it helped was Netanyahu because he's still in power. Is it possible that Hamas was manipulated by someone in Netanyahu's government to do that attack?
Well, I think, thank you, Lisa, for that. And I'm not the most informed, but I do know that actually Netanyahu gave money to Hamas. Because you have to remember, Hamas isn't just the military arm. They're in charge of feeding and taking care of, they're the government of Gaza. They were voted in democratically and the people who did the military arm are not necessarily the ones running the government in Gaza. But and so the Israeli government and Netanyahu in particular gave money to Hamas. And it's not clear what I can project my own, what I think his intentions were. He wanted Hamas to attack. I think that's clear. He's wanted to have an excuse to destroy Hamas. I mean, that's not that hard to conjecture. It's hard to say exactly how that mechanism worked. And also, Hamas has its own mind. It's not like acting simply on what Netanyahu thinks. Netanyahu only cares about Netanyahu, obviously. And Hamas is trying to make I don't know their mind either. And and they don't represent the Palestinian people who've been murdered and killed and destroyed and starved. So it's not clear that they're always this heroic mechanism on their behalf, as we know. But the Israeli government has wanted, and if you remember, during those protests, they were not against the occupation. They were against Netanyahu and the judicial changes that would make him a permanent, it would stop democracy
Right.
in
Right.
Israel.
He wants to be a tyrant. He wants to be a dictator.
He wanted to be their, ongoing leader. And so
to avoid going to jail for his corruption is my understanding.
exactly.
Because
So
once he gets out of office, he pulled a Trump.
Right.
He thinks if he's in office, he can get away with it.
But the Israeli people did not go all in against the occupation. They left that out of the narrative at that point.
Right.
They were afraid it would split the Israelis, and it would have.
Yeah.
And they didn't want that controversy, so they just made it an attack on Netanyahu. It's easy to attack Netanyahu.
So they pulled a Russia-China thing with misinformation.
I mean, these are all political strategies and calculations that groups make. But for us in the United States, it made no difference. Our view before October 7th was the same as after, that the occupation, that the domination of the Israeli government over the Palestinians is vile and horrific. It was before, and then the military domination and murder of all these 33,000 plus, what do they say, over 75,000 wounded people, blinded children, amputated limbs. I mean, not even to mention the starvation that's going now.
Yeah.
And the disease.
Torture, which is torture.
Torture, yeah.
Hey, we're going to go on to communion where Kenichi's going to lead us, but Barb, wow, what a blessing that you were on today. I remember a conversation we had a couple of months ago, and I said thank you for being a moral leader and giving us the power to speak up even more so. And I remember, and I'm going to put words in your mouth because I don't remember exactly how you said it, and you can correct me if I don't get it right, but you said something like, don't wait for those who are Jewish to speak up, but to follow our own moral sense. Is that kind of what you said?
Probably, because I think that's why we were there. That's why we speak together, because that's how we find our way here today with all of you, is our strong inner knowing that's beyond anything from the outside of us. Yeah. And when we find the outside that matches the inside, that's when our strength grows and our solidarity grows.
Wow. Well, my prayer is that all of us will have the courage to make sure that we acquaint ourselves more deeply with our own consciences, and that we will follow our conscience. And one thing that you said today, I lost the debate, but I knew I was right. Wow, that's I mean, that's a nugget to take away, if there ever was one. So can we all say thank
Yes.
you to our
Thank-
own Barb, Parmet, everybody? Yay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
And let's see, we're gonna go on to communion, but Jade has raised her hand, so go ahead, Jade. Or did you just mean to clap? Oops.
That was a little bit accidental, but honestly, just really quickly before we go, you can really see the parallels of what's happening in imperialism with our country and the way things are being run over there. So if you demonize and dehumanize the folks that are pushing back against atrocities, for example, on our southern border, we have certain people in our news that are saying that everybody coming from Mexico and the countries below are animals. They're pouring in, they're taking our jobs, they're animals, they're rapists. And so you start to see, oh my gosh, they're saying the same thing about the Palestinians, and how can we ever have any peace if these people are infiltrating, not realizing that like they were here before we were, and all of that. So thank you for that, and just helping us to really understand what's really going on. And I know people don't want to see babies and children starving, but my gosh, if that's the only way that we can humanize it, nobody wants to see children in particular and those poor folks literally starving to death. Nobody wants to see that. And so sometimes we have to look at what's really going on in order to change our hearts. So I really appreciate that, and it really helps me to draw these parallels with what's going on in our own country, and I thank you for that so much.
Thanks, Jade. And if anybody wants to hear more from Barb, you can go to our podcast, God is Not an Asshole. She was interviewed twice, once last year before October 7th, and then again more recently. And in the first one, you'll hear her tell about her experience as, I think, a 12-year-old visiting Israel.
16 years.
Okay, 16. Yeah. And where she knew she was right and she was losing the debate.
Sure.
We're going to hear from Kenichi, but I just wanted to also mention that we won't see Roy and Cheryl until the end of the month. They are on a road trip. So good on them. I mean, they're both retired, and so this is one of the reasons you retire. And also Dr. Dave is, forgot where he is, but he went to meet with family, a mini reunion, and also to experience the solar eclipse. So anyway, we are glad to have you two, Kenichi, and welcome back, Sayuri, from Japan, being with family.
Barb, I join with Pastor David and all of us here to say thank you for essentially pinch hitting for us. But your voice is really, really valuable. And currently I'm finishing a publication by Jewish Voice for Peace on anti-Semitism. Just a great resource for me. And thank you very much. So as we join our hearts around the Lord's table, I was trying to, when I'm always asked to do this, I always try to find a nugget to hold on to that tends to be the thread of our time together. And one thing that I caught was actually in the song where the line goes something like, "There is another way." In all the violence and the immorality, the senselessness of war, killing, and the enmity between the Palestinians, the Israelis, and then more globally. I mean, translating, as Jade mentioned, the white Americans and the so-called the outsiders, the racism and all of that. I believe that the Lord's table calls us to solidarity with all of humanity. And as Jesus invites us to follow him, eat of his flesh, which is his broken body, and then drink of his blood, the cup and the blood that he shed, symbolized by the cup that we partake, as we stand in solidarity with him. In essence, we are saying yes to all of humanity, and saying yes, there is another way, and love wins. Basically, love will be victorious over all these things. So as we come to the table, let's keep this in mind in our hearts, and let's say yes to Christ and a yes to humanity. So let's take the body of Christ and let's partake together in saying yes to Christ, yes to humanity. And then the cup. Let's all partake. Thank you, God. Amen.
Thank you. Hey, Kenichi, before you go, you're
Yes.
usually in Pasadena. Where are you today? Where is
Oh,
that?
well, Sayuri can explain.
Toyama, Japan.
Ah, that's your home.
Yes.
All right. Wow. Well, may we all get a chance to visit there.
Yes.
Oh, it was lovely.
All right. Well, everybody have a beautiful, if you want to hang around and say hi to somebody, you're more than welcome to, but have a wonderful rest of your Sunday. And thanks again, Barb Parmet.
That's beautiful in the background.
Hey, Michelle.
Hello, how are y'all?
Oh, Michelle.
Hey, Michelle.
It
Long
is
time
so
no
good to
see.
see you.
Good to see you.
Good to see y'all. It's been a minute.